Good morning. Hello, day 3 of Litmus Live. I am so excited about this panel. I know I say that every day, but this one I'm actually very excited about extra. Um, this group has been so fun to talk to, and I think this is a really great topic. Before we get to that, I want to do a little bit of quick housekeeping notes. Um, Yes, everything is being recorded. If you missed anything in the past couple of days, you can go back to the agenda, and the recordings are all there in the agenda sort of portal where you can find them. Um, if you have not joined our Slack channel, please do so. If you don't have access to it or don't know how to get it, you can email us at conference@litmus.com to get access. All of the sessions and speakers will have a dedicated Slack channel, so you can hop in there and ask questions. This panel itself will have its own Slack channel, so please do hop in and ask questions after the session if you have any. We will be checking the chat and the Q&A section of the chat today as we go, but if we don't get to anything, we will definitely post the session or post the questions there. Before I get to our introductions of our panelists, I want to sort of set the stage for the topic today. We called this panel Beyond the Click, the Hidden ROI of Email Marketing. And I love this because I think this topic is often talked about, but often also misunderstood. You know, the ROI for email marketing is often cited at $43 for every dollar spent or something around there. And while I think this is largely a true data point, all things considered, it deserves a lot of education and nuance and understanding, because I think it's wildly underestimating the actual ROI of email when it comes to the work that email does to really move customers at all stages of the funnel, to build more trust and to educate and entertain, not to mention driving activity outside of the email conversions. So without further ado, I want to have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we will kick off into questions. Jean, let's start with you.
Hey, hi everybody. My name is Jean Jennings. I am CEO and Chief Strategist of my own boutique consulting firm, Email Optimization Shop. We help medium to enterprise sized companies make their email marketing more effective and more profitable.
Anna.
Hi everyone, my name is Anna Levitin. I lead lifecycle at B2B PropTech company Doorloop, and I'm coming to email from cultural anthropology background.
Which I love, because I also have that background. Emily, let's do you.
I'm coming from musical theater background. I'm Emily Ryan, and I'm an email marketer. I own my own boutique email firm as well called Westfield Creative. And we've been working with clients, mostly e-commerce brands, small businesses, kind of a extremely wide range of clients for the last 10 years, helping grow their business with email.
And for the audience, just so you know, both Anna and Emily's presentations were yesterday. You can go catch their sessions, which were phenomenal. Jean's is actually happening right after this. So I hope that you all will take it. We'll definitely check those out. All right, first things first. One thing we have been talking about a lot over at Litmus is just the value of email as an awareness tactic, which might seem a little incongruent because on some level, there is some level of awareness because they've given us their email address. But as we all know, in email, you can't really ask someone to marry you on a first date, or I suppose you could, but you probably shouldn't. How do you all think about email as an awareness driver, and how should marketers measure that stage of the relationship? Jean, let's start with you.
Sure. I mean, excuse me. It definitely drives awareness. I mean, I'm sure we've all had the experience, right? You get an email in the morning. Let's just say it's from the Gap and it says that shorts are 50% off today. You don't open it because you're in a rush, but you see that in the subject line. On your travels during the day, you see a Gap, you realize you've got half an hour and you go buy shorts. Yep. There's no record in the electronic universe that email influenced that purchase, but it totally did. So I think that's one thing to definitely be aware of. I always try to make sure that, the subject lines give people the information they need to move forward. I think it's good to try to track awareness, but honestly, I think, the best, it's hard to track it, but just if people are engaging with your email, obviously that email wasn't open, but if people are, clicking at a decent interval, I think that's the way to do it. Back in the old days, we would do things like focus groups, and you would say, what do they think about, if this brand were at a party, what kind of a person would they be? We don't do that so much anymore. So I think, that it's there. You can't necessarily get a solid number for it, but it definitely is an effect.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we say, let's just show up in the inbox, and that's literally awareness. Like so many of the clients I work with, they don't want to necessarily sell a product. They'll come to me and say, I just want to make sure we're showing up like once a month, twice a month, hopefully more than once a month. But, like a landscaping company or, a cleaning company, these service-based businesses, they just want to make their business, known to everyone. So showing up is so important.
It's top of mind, right? You want to make sure that when they need you, you're the brand that pops into their mind first. And email's a great way to do that. And you can do that even if they don't open your emails.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. What are some interest? I know Emily did a great presentation yesterday about the Welcome series, which I think is all about building the right kinds of awareness and sort of building that frequency and top of mindness, if that's a word. Anna, what are some interesting tactics you've seen email marketers use to drive education and awareness at the top of the funnel?
I first want to mention that we are accustomed to think of the sales funnel as, clear steps from awareness to conversion. And I see that the funnel is now changing more to, let's say, infinity loop. So sometimes when users come and we as a software or product, we consider them as a top of funnel, they actually did their like massive research in how we call it, dark social media. They got their information from the community. They talked to their peers. So my advice is to give them an opportunity to choose what content then they want to consume. As we usually move from like problem, solution, product. So maybe it's worth to focus on top of funnel more on product. And I'm not saying that it should be about brand, and completely not focusing on user, but it actually brings me to the second point, that it should be industry focused. For example, I work for B2B company, and not all like email related solution are relevant for B2B. So whenever I receive another like email communication, I would like to see case studies that are really focused on my industry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jean, what about you? Any sort of interesting tactics you've seen on that front?
Lead magnets are just so valuable. And so that's one thing I think, providing relevant content. And the beautiful part about that is if you use like a white paper or a special report, that's probably the kind of information they're going to get from you via email. Now that's probably more on the B2B side. But yeah, I mean, anything you can do. I have clients who often want to offer something that's kind of out of range. So for instance, I had a client a couple of years ago who was like, yeah, if they sign up for my email newsletter and I want to attract realtors, I'm going to give somebody an iPad. And I'm like, that's a really bad incentive to use, because everybody wants an iPad. It would be better to say, you know what, sign up for the newsletter. You'll be entered to win a free registration for the National Association of Realtors conference, because that's only going to be valuable to your target audience. So the idea is really to try to target whatever incentive you're using so that it only appeals to the people you want on the list.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There is, those lead magnets can be also really helpful to sort of build up more data points that you might want. So if you're using a lead magnet through an email series, certainly you don't need to ask for their email again, but you can use that to sort of help identify where they might want to go with you sort of further in the relationship.
The other thing I do a lot is I do what I call category emails. So for instance, I had a client that had 12 different product categories. Like one was like mugs, another was like blankets. And what we did is we created one email that had a block for each of the categories, and we sent it out to our list. And we just said sort of like, hey, here's like what we've got. And then we looked at the clicks after the fact to see what people clicked on. And anyone who clicked on blankets for the next 6 weeks, one email a week was focused all on blankets. Whereas someone who had clicked on mugs for the next 6 weeks, one of the emails they got every week was focused on mugs. So it's a really great way to kind of, in a sly sort of covert way, let them self-select and tell you what topic or what products you have that they're interested in. And again, that's not the only thing we sent them. They got other emails each week, but at least one a week was targeted to them. Those sends were really small, but we saw a really high return on ROI.
Yeah.
Because they were really highly relevant. Sorry.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, in the post-conversion world, you have all that data about what they bought before, but you can sort of get things like that sort of earlier in the relationship. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Emily, I know that you talked about this a lot in your session yesterday, but what are some ways that you think of to build trust early in the email relationship, and how do you measure if it's working?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crucial that, when someone opts in, that moment is so crucial to really engage them and start building that trust immediately. And yeah, I did talk about it quite a bit in my welcome email talk, because I think the welcome email or the welcome series, welcome journey, is an amazing time to build trust. You can immediately send them an email and say, hey, I'm Emily, and this is, thank you for subscribing. I really appreciate it. And this is why I started my business. Like, tell them your story, and just be really honest and open. That's a great time because you're going to get that high engagement. They're going to open that welcome email most likely. So hook them right then. It's like the first date analogy, you've got to build trust right away.
Yeah, I always say, I mean, what's the first thing that most of us do when we do sign up for an email list? We go immediately to our inbox and see what they sent us. Whether we're looking for a discount code or something else, it's almost like that moment is so critical. And I think that's when they're probably most engaged. Jean, did you have anything to add there on the sort of building trust specifically early in the relationship?
The best way to build trust is to send them relevant, interesting content. And I think that's one thing people kind of forget. I mean, again, I love Emily's idea if it's a relationship. I think you referenced it too, Cynthia, at the beginning, but you don't, propose on the first date. But that's kind of the thing. You're setting the stage. I teach at Georgetown, and we just did an exercise with the students where we showed them a welcome message that was just like, hi, welcome to the list. We'll be back later with some more info. It's terrible to start a relationship. Terrible. You want to pull them in. You want to get them thinking, wow, I can't wait till the next email from this company. What are they going to send me next? So very important just to deliver, because that's that honeymoon period, right? If the first 5 emails they get are super relevant, super interesting, they're hooked. They're going to open the rest. If the first 5 are blah, meh, you're probably going to lose them.
Yeah. And, it sort of goes back to that thing where your open rate is much more indicative of what you've sent them before than it is about your subject line. It's, they're going to remember that and probably think positively of it.
Yeah, I think we have a good a comment in the chat that so many brands and businesses forget to tell their story. And I think, with B2B, people are like, oh, well, we're a very serious organization. You can still connect with the people that you're emailing. I mean, it's email. So I would say even for B2B, it's so important to share that founder story as well.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I want to shift over to a post-conversion world and, starting sort of in B2B, because that's the easiest place to make this analogy. Let's assume there is one main point in time where someone becomes a customer. What role does email play in onboarding and retention? Anna, let's start with you on that one.
I love this question, and my session is on the topic of churn, but why it's connected, because if customer is unhappy during their onboarding, they will churn eventually, because they usually go from onboarding to platform adoption and to retention, renewal, and bring in other peers. So in a previous question, I mentioned infinity loop. I'm not saying that onboarding should be infinite and should never finished. But what I see oftentimes that onboarding is only time oriented. So it's like 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks. But I would rather focus on specific milestones. For example, for us in Doorloop, we track about like 4 or 5 milestones that we want user to achieve in the first 2 to 4 weeks. So the communication and the onboarding is based on either they adopted this feature or not. And if they didn't adopt, so the entire onboarding will be focused on this specific feature. Why? Because we know that adopting this feature first will more likely make them like to renew.
Yeah, and then you sort of segment accordingly. So if they have taken that action, they're going to go get a different email experience from you. Is that how you measure that? That's really interesting.
Correctly. If they adopted like all 4 features, so it doesn't mean that's it, the onboarding is finished. Because the fact that I went through this onboarding newsletter like 1,000 times, it doesn't mean that they actually open and read them. So it's fine to remind about a feature like a second or third time.
Yeah. Jean, Emily, how are you all thinking of retention and sort of that post-conversion world?
Yeah, I mean, I think Anna is spot on. And it just makes me think of, when you're actually building out the journey or the flow or whatever you call it, using those branch points, those if else, to send people on different journeys. Like it's all about personalizing their experience in those first weeks. And then, obviously you personalize, but then you don't want to drop off after 4 weeks and be like, okay, we're done. Like, using branches throughout your journey is so important.
And I come from the publishing world, so I'm used to companies where we're selling subscription products and there's an annual renewal date. Mm-hmm. And, years ago when I was working there, we had an email we sent out every morning that was just sort of a synopsis of what was in the print publication that day. And it's funny because there was a move afoot, we don't need this, it's redundant, why are we doing this? What we found is that people who actually engaged with that were much more likely to renew than the people who didn't. So that's another thing to think about. You want to deliver content as many different ways as your people want it. And so email can be a really, really important piece of that renewal retention program, no matter what your industry.
And that engagement is sort of a key metric to measure across that. There is a correlation there. I think that's also important to remember.
Definitely.
Let me find my questions. Hold on. What are some interesting and effective ways people are using email to create stronger customer relationships over time? Anna, let's start with you on that one too. I feel like that's in your wheelhouse.
We are now end of October, right? And I can say that I'm looking forward to Black Friday because I know that my inbox will be overloaded and probably I will buy like 1-2 brands. But what I'm really looking forward is the end of the year campaigns. And I guess each of us either receive it from Spotify, Duolingo, or Strava. And I think it's a great communication because I open these emails and I'm like, wow, this is for me. This is about me. And actually, as someone who creates email for our prospects and customers, I always try to think, okay, what is there for customers? So this is the first question email geeks should ask themselves.
Like the Spotify Wrapped.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
It's brilliant. Yeah.
Emily, anything you would add there on sort of creating stronger relationships over time?
Yeah. I mean, I think she named some amazing brands, but I think it comes down to personalization, really beyond the click, like we're talking about. Like if that someone's clicking on mugs and they're interested in that, for several emails, then building out that journey for them to really focus on that. One of our clients sells greeting cards, and they sell holiday cards, birthday, all these different categories. And we have different flows for different categories of people. So we have these are the people that are interested in the baby shower invites, and they get their own welcome series. These are the wedding people. We're collecting their wedding date. We can do a whole series based on that. We have business, people getting business thank you cards. Like, so having those categories is just going to make the experience so much stronger when we're talking about going beyond that click.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is, I think so much we think in terms of, well, we need them to buy, or we need them to do this, or we need them to do that. But really, relationships have a lot of different types of communication in them. One of the categories I've been working with a lot lately are higher education, universities and colleges, and getting people to enroll. And one of the things we've been doing there is mixing in addition to our series to, get them to apply, to get them to come back to whatever. Once a month, we send an email that's just for fun. So, for instance, did you know there is I Love Lucy Day, National I Love Lucy Day? So on National I Love Lucy Day, they send out an email that's just like, hey, it's I Love Lucy Day. Here's a clip. And it's that clip with the conveyor belt, we're in the candy factory. And so we mix in once a month one of those messages. And I think it's really nice. For National Watermelon Day, we actually provide a recipe for watermelon and feta salad. What does this have to do with higher education? Nothing. But who doesn't love Lucy? Who doesn't like a nice watermelon and feta salad? And so it's nice because it brings a smile. It, again, keeps that brand top of mind. It also keeps people opening your messages, because if they know that this message, instead of being a, buy now, could be a recipe or a funny video, that's another thing that really helps build that relationship. Because really what you need to do is you need them to keep opening the emails and keep engaging with the brand. And so by mixing these things in, that really helps.
I mean, I always say, like, after all, we're all just humans. We're all just people opening, like, getting to work and opening our inbox. How much would you love to open an email that's like, happy I Love Lucy Day from a B2B company or something? We all like to smile. So it's important not to forget that.
Exactly.
That's such a good point. On that topic, how do we measure that? Like, I think that one of the things that we're all constantly doing is trying to prove the value of email to the folks in the rest of our organizations as to what role email is playing there. What signals can we look for within email to better understand if an email is helping increase, the health of the customer, the overall customer health? Anna, let's start with you on that one.
So we still need to track the soft metrics. And when I'm saying soft metrics, it's open rate, click-through rate, negative metrics, bounce, spam, and everything. But I think three groups of metrics that sort of beyond the click, it's product re-engagement, is churn prevention and retention, and of course, brand loyalty. So I really like idea about these newsletters on different topics. And we're like the B2B, the majority of B2B software, when we say, when we send emails to our users, we like to say, oh, we help you to grow. But it's actually not you. It's like we help you as a professional to grow. But what is there, like, beyond the just software, beyond the solution? Is there like any industry news? Is there anything that help like this particular individual, regardless to their position, regardless to the company, to grow professionally?
That's a really good point.
You know what else you can do to measure it? You can actually ask in the email for them to rate this email or to give you feedback on whether they liked it. And I have to admit, I have kind of a love-hate with these kind of things, because I've worked with clients where they weren't really executed very well, not through my fault. I've worked with times when it's good. You're not going to get 100% response rate. Not everyone's going to click, and tell you what they thought of that email, but people will. And so, typically it's something simple like a happy face or a sad face or an up thumb or a down thumb. And, if it's an up thumb, you can just be like, thank you. If it's a down thumb, you can send them to a page that's like, what did you not like about this email, or what's going on? I think that a lot of times people don't want to do that because they're like, oh, that's going to be a nightmare on the back end. How am I going to manage that? If people respond, they expect me to read it. But it's a relationship. Isn't that the whole point of it? Why are you sending people email if you don't want to hear back from them? And that also goes to that whole do not reply thing, which I personally hate. I did a case study with a client who had a do not reply, where I said, look, turn it on for a month. Let me just look at what comes in. And I categorized it. And we had a couple hot leads. We had a whole bunch of warm leads. So if you're doing do not reply, that is really a bad thing. You have to stop that. And there's ways to filter out the out of offices, but it's really important to just be there so people can tell you what they think, whether or not you have a rating scale in the email.
And I actually love building out in like a welcome series, one email that just asks a question. So you send a couple welcome emails, introduce your brand, and then say, hey, like, what would you like to hear about from me? Like, how can I help you? And just make it a super simple email and just literally ask people to reply back and tell them what they want. It works really well.
Yeah,
that's great. All right, I have one more question, and then we've got a couple in the chat that I want to try and get to. Let's move on to the B2C world. Once they are a customer, how do you all sort of think about measuring performance when obviously we can't expect them to purchase in every email? And I think that's where part of this ROI number gets us a little bit stuck. Do you need to mix in other campaigns that are more education, inspiration, or is the trick truly just to keep sending products until they click on one? I think that's a trick question. But Jean, let's start with you.
Yeah, don't just keep sending buy now emails until they buy now. That is definitely the death of it. You know, again, it's just like any other relationship. And I think that's what's important. I often with clients, you know, will have a life cycle grid, and I'll have all the different campaigns that are going on. And so it's not about thinking about your email as this one single thread of emails. There's all these different tracks that are going on. And the idea is to make sure that there's tracks that relate to the key milestones in that relationship. And that could be anything from a purchase, which is a great milestone. It could be downloading a certain white paper, and then they get thrown into a journey that talks about that specific topic. But yeah, you don't want to just have it be purchase. It needs to be a mix of education and relationship building and all that. And I think that's why I think it's important to think in terms of different tracks. And that's why automation is great, because you can set them up so that they're going to trigger automatically, which makes you more efficient as an email marketing team.
Yeah, it's really good. Emily, anything to add on that front?
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. I mean, yeah, you cannot just send emails just to send emails. And there's so many different, we always talk about all the different types of emails. So I do think it's important, you know, when we have a brand new customer that comes to us and knows nothing about email and says, okay, what should I send? We really try to think out, okay, let's do one promo email. Let's do one educational email. Let's do one, feedback email. So we're really trying to always weave in different types of emails in between, okay, go buy our product. You gotta retain people. So.
There is a relevant question in chat that I think sort of it ties in nicely here, which is how do I convince, and I think we've all been here, how do I convince my more sales-driven counterparts that a content-forward message, welcome email, or any email really, is better than a sales pitch? How do you all approach that?
I would like to take this one. First of all, when we are talking about the welcome email series, why don't we invite users to our secondary channels, like to our social media? Because this is something, again, it's not a sales pitch, but yet it's measurable.
Mm-hmm. Now, see, we agree on so much, Anna, but I don't like to send people back to social media once they're on my email list. And let me explain why. And part of it's the clients I've worked with. So I feel like social media is a great place for a low commitment way to get to know a brand. And once you think you like that brand, that's when you sign up for email. So I feel like you don't want to be sending people back to that one-to-many communication place. I think you want to keep them in that one-to-one, which is why I see email as this. May be because I worked for a large telecom whose name you would know for a number of years. And one of their rules was you always have to send people back to our Facebook page, in the newsletter, and the Facebook page was full of disgruntled customers complaining. And I was like, why are we sending anyone here ever? Why don't we just shut this off? So I think it kind of depends on what's going on. If there's a certain conversation going on in social media that you think people would want to join, definitely send them that conversation. But I'm just not a fan of sending people back to the kind of the pool when they've already said they want to be with you.
I think also you have
to settle the debate.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I agree with both of you. Okay. You both have good points. I will say, like, if you're going back to a sales team, I think it's so much about education with email. looking at so many things beyond the conversion. Are people not unsubscribing? Is your list growing? Like really showing your team like the importance of growing your email list and how what can happen with a larger email list. There's so many metrics you can provide your sales team besides like, oh, this is how many clicked and converted.
Yeah. All right. We have I've already gotten to time, and I can't believe that happened so quickly. There are a couple of other great questions in the chat that I'm actually going to put in our Slack channel. So thank you all so much for your participation today. This is one of my favorite topics, and I feel like we could have gone on for many, many more hours here. So Emily, Jean, Anna, thank you so much.